All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 367, Unwomen. I had to do that. They deserve it. You can't be a woman if you're not an adult, and if you freak out over people having rights, you're not an adult. Like, that's just the way it is. So they're unwomen, not UN women. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks and the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson. And in the background, we have the Doge in charge, Brian Martinez, running the show. And tonight, we are going to continue looking into this article. I thought we were nearing the end because, you have this blurb here, but sorry, guys. They're women. Just little verbose there. So we'll read what we gotta read to get through this. And I guess this is probably gonna be just this article because that's a show's worth right there. But we still have the next article upcoming also. How to counter the manosphere's toxic influence. So we're really gonna get into it. Last week, the UN women, the unwomen, womansplained to us about the various parts of our movements, the manosphere, and of course everything they said was wrong and stupid. But there's more wrong for us to look at, and so this week we are going to get into that. But before we do that, gotta do what we gotta do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platforms tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justtip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And before we get into the material, I want to remind everybody that this upcoming Saturday, so just a couple of days from now, we are having the Mixed Up Meetup. The Mixed Up Meetup will be at Round 1 in the Fairfield Mall in Beaver Creek, Ohio. It will start at 4:00. I'll be there at 4:00. And I know Brian's going to be there. I don't know, Mike and Lauren, we never got funding straightened out for you guys to come, did we?
No, and at this point it's just a little too late. Any kind of tickets would be way too expensive.
Yeah, and it's partly my fault. Like, I ended up unable to participate in any kind of fundraising because I overdid the overtime again. Like, I literally haven't had a day off since last month, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, well, I do that sometimes. I have no, not AM, Jen Pottle. I promise you, PM. I know I'm usually a night bird, but not this time. This will be. I can stay up till the cows come home, but there aren't so many cows in the urban part of Dayton. Usually although there are sheep. I drive past a sheep farm on my way to work in the city of Beaver Creek.
That's cool.
I drive past a sheep farm in the city of Beaver Creek because I drive through Beaver Creek on my way to work. Sometimes. But anyway, yeah, we will be having this meetup. It starts 4 p.m. The venue closes at 2 a.m. So that's plenty of time. And that's essentially the information. I will repost the blog post on the HBB blog to put that information out there as well. And for anybody that's coming that hasn't booked, there are hotels all over the area because we're not too far off from the Nutter Center. No tickets are required. You can just it's just a regular business. You can just walk in. You'll have to come find us, but definitely you can walk in and walk around till you find us, and we will be there. You'll have to look at some of our more recent live streams that I've been on if you want to recognize me, because the last 4 years have been a little rough. So I don't look exactly the same as I did when we were at ICMI 19. So a little more gray and quite a bit heavier. So there you go. But yeah, if you want to look around for hotels and stuff, we're close to. This is going to be close enough to Wright State University and the Nutter Center, which is named after a family name. It's not a place where crazy people go for
I
friends
was
in the
gonna
UK.
ask.
No, it's an actual last name. But we're close enough to that there are a ton of hotels, and they range from the lower priced end up to the hoity-toity, you pay through the nose to stay a night here. There are some that accept pets. There are some that don't. Like there's a little bit of everything. So hope to see you all there. And that's that with regard to that meetup. I know we also have an upcoming meetup in September in Calgary, and that information has also been posted on the HBB blog. I don't know as much off the top of my head about that, and I don't have the post in front of me. But I will repost that as well this week, and then again at least once next month so people can see it, and we'll talk more extensively about that after the mixed up meetup. This is, by the way, not just for MRAs. The reason I'm having it at an arcade is because of our participation in the original and second Gamergate controversies, and now the third Gamergate controversy. Gamergate will never die. Right?
Heard.
So gamers are invited, not just welcome, but invited. So if you were thinking about coming and maybe not going to because you thought, oh, this is just for MRAs, no, for all of us. We have a lot of overlap.
There's a third iteration of Gamergate now. Have I just not been paying attention?
Oh my gosh, I don't even. we'll waste a whole show.
Yeah,
it's not a waste to discuss this. It's actually about men. But God, I can't think of the name of the Australian group that did this. But payment processors were targeted by a women's group, a feminist group in Australia, demanding that essentially that lewd games be removed from gaming platforms. Jesus. And several did in response because the payment processors put pressure on them. We won't allow payment processing for your games, for your products, if you have lewd games on your platforms. And so now there's a fight, and there is at least one platform that has come out and said, all right, we're going to counter this by having only lewd games. And it's going to be a challenge for them to get funding because you're going to have to pay with cryptocurrency or something. They won't be able to accept credit cards. But what's interesting is this thing we discussed on Tuesday, Trump's executive order telling banks that they couldn't debank people for being collective shout. Thank you, Richard Bier. But with Trump telling banks that they can't debank people based on political reasons, the distinct possibility exists that collective shout might be shit out of luck in the future. So that's kind of what I'm hoping. But there was definitely another controversy there, and there was definitely some activism. There was definitely some writing to politicians and writing to, not that the banks care who writes to them, but yeah. There you go.
Wow.
So, in a nutshell, they're not going to stop, and so we can't stop either.
Yeah.
This is essentially going to go on until some sort of event takes place that definitively puts the kibosh to the idea that you can control other people's associations by using political activism against businesses, targeting businesses to basically promote your own prejudices. And like that's eventually going to have to happen. Like they're still in the fuck around portion right now. They haven't found out yet. That at some point they are going to find out. So that's the way it is. And in the meantime, speaking of women's groups targeting men for harassment campaigns and ban hammers and slander and all that jazz, we have the unwomen, the legally adult females who don't act very adult. Like this almost reads like a high school slam book. I don't know if you know what if you if they did that where you grew up, Lauren, but there was this thing where I grew up where they would get a few details about your life, like from a questionnaire or just from discussion or whatever. And the gals would make this book, like multiple pages in a notebook or folded paper, whatever, where they would use it as roasting material, essentially. And like wherever they didn't have something filled in, they'd make it up, based on like educated guesses.
Isn't there like isn't there a movie that does that?
Something like that, yeah.
I can't remember the name of the movie, but we didn't do that over where I lived, but I am familiar, yes.
Yeah, we
Oh,
did
wait,
that. Well, I shouldn't say
wait.
we. Girls I grew up with did that. I
It's
was a
considered
subject.
normal for high school girls or whatever, or college girls or whatever,
High school.
to organize a propaganda network.
Yep.
In order to badmouth everyone.
Yep.
I did not know that was normal, even at the level of high school. But it's obviously familiar at the level of the mainstream media, because that's literally all they do. And I don't know. I'm just sticking some shit to some walls now, guys. I'm a conspiracy theorist of some sort.
If you think it's bad in high school, when you get the worst time of a kid's life is like between the ages of 12 and 15 in terms of how the other kids treat them. Like that is peak bullying time for most kids. And so either they're at the bully end and they're always getting into trouble, or they're at the bullied end and they're always getting something rotten done to them. And I don't know. I guess I don't know if I could be considered at both ends, because like my response to being bullied was a little different. It depended on how competent the bully was. I might, if I was being hit and I couldn't abandon the fight, then I would hit back. And sometimes I was more competent, sometimes the bully was. But if I was being picked on verbally, I am pretty mean verbally. Like anybody that's seen my Twitter knows But you can't do that in school, right? You can't cuss somebody up one side and down the other in school because you get sent to the principal's office. So more than once, I was heard to yell something in the hallway at some dipshit. You can't call somebody a dipshit. You can't yell fuck you. You can't do any of that. So echoing down the hallways of my junior high was fornication upon you and upon the equine transportation you rode to this location. And of course, the next thing you know, kids are going, what did she just say? But I felt better. And I ended up getting asked out by a fellow nerd who understood completely what I said. And the worst one was calling a guy a hemorrhoid. But I couldn't be sure I wouldn't get in trouble for that, so I called him a bleeding inflammatory wound upon the fundament. And which was why I got asked out, because that guy was the only one who knew what that meant. Not the guy I was targeting, but the guy that was standing next to him that had to explain to him that I had just referred to him as a hemorrhoid. And that was the end of. He didn't pick on me anymore after that, because he didn't like not understanding what I said to him. So, I was being bullied and I bullied back. But so there you go. Story of my life. But in any case, yeah. These are the ways of the teenager. Today you would probably just get laughed at for that, though. And probably nobody would know that the fundament is an old archaic medical term for the anal sphincter. So, on to the article. So last week we finished up finding out that the UN women only halfway understand men going their own way. They don't quite understand quite why men going their own way think the way they do. I mean, feminists are the ones that basically originated the idea that if you have privilege, you're going to be blind to it. And so, of course, they don't understand men going their own way. They are the ones with the privilege of lying, cheating, stealing, and getting away with it. When a man is the person that they're targeting. So they have no idea why men would avoid them.
The notion of men going their own way sort of wouldn't exist in a patriarchy. This is the problem. I mean, a patriarchy is men going their own way and dragging women by their hair to a cave to rape them. Is what they're doing to achieve it. So it's like the idea of the manosphere. Like, ask any feminist or feminist adjacent leftist to describe the manosphere, and they'll describe like a fringe, underground, unusual like containment of male in-group preference. Meanwhile, they believe in a patriarchy where the entire world is male in-group preference. And yet they're attacking this manosphere, this idea that someone had somewhere that maybe men can have in-group preferences. Like, the level of doublethink has gone cosmic at this point. And I'm not even here for it. I mean, I am here. Actually, I'm not.
Yeah, that's pretty much in a nutshell. I'm here for it and I'm not. It's kind of what I've seen of MGTOW, and it's kind of what inspired that and the way that sort of the original formation of the Honey Badger started with an argument in there was a Lady MRA subreddit. None of us really were active in there before this, because we were kind of busy in the MRA subreddit. We didn't really need a separate space for women. Like, that was not really necessary. but it was created anyway. And they did invite MRAs in there to have a discussion with them about things. And there was a guy named Factory 2 on Reddit that they asked a question of, and he answered that question. And then they circled the wagons around him and started firing flaming acid-tipped arrows at him, essentially barbs. And of course, one of them was the "Don't you respect women?" barb, which I fucking hate, because respect is earned, and you shouldn't. If you have to ask, "Don't you respect women?" You don't deserve respect. If you're asking for respect, you don't deserve it, right? But they really bullied the shit out of him just for simply giving a rundown, an explanation of the actual nature of the various groups that UN Women belittled here. Although not incels, because there wasn't much discussion about incels at that time. But he explained the men's rights movement, the differences between the men's rights movement, MGTOW, pickup artists, and so on. And it was, his explanations were very clear. They were not, he didn't write with kid gloves on. He gave very, very straightforward explanations of what's going on with men, right? And these women were deeply offended by not having their feelings coddled in that writing. And they felt talked down to, even though the question that they had asked initially showed that they were ignorant of the things that he was explaining. And in their arguments as to why he didn't need to explain those, they demonstrated very clearly that they didn't understand, right? Like, that pretty much solidified for me that, like, I always thought, MGTOW was something that really was justified. As long as you're in a situation where you don't have to do anything wrong and somebody can have you sent to jail and you have to fight tooth and nail to prove your innocence. And even if you do, people are going to treat you like you probably were guilty and you just got away with it. I can understand wanting to distance yourself from the people that can do that to you. I could certainly understand that if you have a group of people that you're not allowed to vet for character because it is considered an ism or a phobia to vet that particular group for people, or a group of people for character. And then at the same time, as you're not allowed to vet them for character, if you get involved with the wrong one that's unscrupulous, one that has no moral code, no ethical code, and she wants something from you, or is mad at you, or just feels like it for no fucking reason at all, like, your life is ruined forever. Everything that you've ever worked for is taken away, and you can't get it back, right? That is a fair reason, perfectly fair reason to say, you know what, I'm just not going to associate with those people. They're dangerous. If I'm not allowed to even figure out which ones are safe to hang around with and which ones aren't safe to hang around with, I won't hang around with any of them. I won't trust any of them. Perfectly understandable.
Absolutely. Right? And you don't have to be a male to feel that way about women, because I am the same way. I don't talk to them. I mean, under very certain circumstances will I engage, in conversation with women. I just don't want to be around you. Women are vicious.
They are, yeah. Yep. And it's like I'm a stubborn ass. So, if I decide I'm going to be somewhere, do something, or be someplace, be involved in something, it has to be unreasonable for me to push the issue before I will not push the issue.
Yeah.
Right. But not everybody can do that. And not everybody should have to. You shouldn't have to struggle to have normal relationships with other people. You shouldn't have to struggle against the tide of legal, not just oppression, but downright constant attack.
Mm-hmm.
Right? To have normal relationships with other people. It's bullshit. But this is the way it is for men with women. You know, you have not just feminist history, but also gynocentric history. And it doesn't start with all men are bad, all men are pigs or anything. It starts with ladies first. And then once ladies first has justified the idea that men are the lower class and women are the upper class and women are deserving of more and men are obligated to, if not give that more, at least step out of the way, that then leads it into all men are pigs, all men, kill all men, blah blah blah, and the tolerance for that. It leads into it's okay to sacrifice the freedom of some innocent men if it protects X number of women from, insert name of violent crime here that is mostly committed against men.
Mm-hmm.
And often by women. When you have the various types of assault and battery that occur in domestic violence, for instance, 2/3 of that, approximately 2/3 of that, a little more than 2/3 in terms of one-way violence. It's provable that 70% of one-way violence is female perpetrated in domestic relationships, and about that is initiated by women as well. And there's research that shows that in violent relationships where the violence goes both ways, that's associated with much more frequent violence, much more frequent perpetration by women. It's not associated with more frequent perpetration by men. So if only 30% of one-way violence is male perpetrated and two-way violence is not associated with more frequent perpetration by men, that indicates that they're still only about 30%. They're only at about 30%. And the increase in violence overall is female driven. And there's reason for that. And it's not that men are deserving of being hit. It's that women don't face the same taboos against violence.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, like I've talked before about, I grew up in a neighborhood where the kids were violent toward each other. There were a lot of latchkey kids. We were frequently unsupervised. Like I said, it was acceptable in the 80s, right? That we might walk out the door at 7 a.m. on a summer day and not come home till lunch, and then go back out and not come home till dinner, and then go back out and then not come home till mosquito bites covered every surface of skin not covered by shorts and a t-shirt, and shoes if we were wearing shoes. We didn't always. So, unless you were leaving your backyard, you left your backyard with shoes on, but you didn't have to wear shoes in your backyard unless you had a dog, for obvious reasons, right? But we were out all day, and we would get into fights over stupid shit. Like I got fish hooked in the mouth once over a Faygo bottle, an empty Faygo bottle out of the trash, because we were making sandcastles and I was using that for water. And so this level of violence, right? Girls could hit each other, and girls could hit boys, and the adults wouldn't get involved. But unless you were significantly older than the person that you were fighting with, right? Or significantly younger. And that's only if somebody told an adult. But if a boy hit a girl, everybody got involved. And there were boys in my neighborhood that did not live by that taboo. I got surrounded by 4 of them one day when I was on the special swing on the swing set. Most swing sets, you have those 2 sets of swings in each section, and this one had one section that had one swing in the middle, and because it was different, everybody liked that swing, and they were all going to beat me up, and so I started swinging higher and higher, and eventually just started kicking from the swing, and it was a heck of a thing. I mean, that was kind of an overreaction, and I knocked 2 of them unconscious and knocked all 4 of them down, and I ran. And one of the other guys in the neighborhood, an older boy, high school kid, because we were all in elementary school, sort of chased them down, the 2 that were after me, and yelled at them and everything, and that allowed me to get away. But that was kind of the neighborhood I grew up in. So I learned, to avoid fights when I could, and not to engage in violence when I could. And it helped me to realize the difference between how boys face consequences after a fight versus how girls face consequences after a fight. Those guys got in trouble for hitting a girl, even though they didn't actually hit me. They just threatened to, and I preemptively, engaged them because they were threatening me, and I didn't get in trouble for knocking them out. I probably handed out a couple of concussions that day with my shoes. And that was, like elementary school kids, you don't always understand quite how bad that is. But if you're a girl that grows up in a neighborhood that, nobody gets into fights, on the other side of town from us, were the upper middle class and upper class families that spent a lot more in their houses than my family spent on theirs, and so on. And they had a different way of handling everything. Like, we played outside all day. It was unsupervised, and it was not organized. Like, we had, squirt guns and toy guns, and if you didn't have enough of those to go around, you picked up a stick that kind of looked like a gun, and you could yell bang. We had boxing matches in the backyard. We played monkey bar tag, jumping around on the monkey bars, played sandlot football and stuff like that. Had a lot of fun. Across town, they had soccer matches that were organized, and they had little league baseball that was organized. The kids on my side of town, some of them joined those teams. I was in little league softball, little girls softball for a while, but everything those kids across town did was organized. They never had a minute where their play wasn't supervised by adults. And so when they would have a conflict, there wasn't this, 2 or 3 hits and the fight was over and everybody settled their differences and now we're going to play football together. There was a feud that would last for weeks. You can't come in my yard. My dad makes more money than your dad. My mom makes more money than your mom. My mom's prettier than your mom. Your mom's fat. And then they'd get in trouble for saying something like that. All right. And there would be no settling it. And nobody learned that the reason that you don't want to start throwing fists at each other is because the other person's going to hit back. And the reason that you don't want to settle your conflicts with violence is because it hurts. And sometimes things turn out worse than you intended for them to turn out. Like, I didn't want to knock anybody out in that situation. I just didn't want to get beaten up over a swing. Right? So when girls grow up having had none of those conflicts and having learned none of those lessons, they know that they can hit boys and boys can't hit them back. Right? They know that they can use that, and they don't learn to consider what it does to your relationship with another person if you develop a habit of pushing and hitting and bullying them all the time. And so you end up with more violence being female perpetrated and less violence being male perpetrated, because males learn the hard way to use less violence. And females don't have that lesson literally hammered home. But yeah, because of that situation, there's a lot of guys that end up in jail after getting the shit beat out of them by their wives, or getting boiling water poured on them, or she tries to stab them and injures herself in the process. Which there's a case in California that I referred to in another video that actually happened. She tried to stab him, and he put his arm up in front of himself to block her from stabbing him, and she brought her arm down on his arm, and his bones are denser and heavier, and so she broke her wrist with the force of her stabbing attempt. And so he was arrested under the primary aggressor policy. And these are things that, when you take them into consideration, if I was male, that would be a deal breaker. If I knew that I wasn't allowed to vet a potential girlfriend for character, and she could lie about me or engage in violence against me, and not only am I not allowed to defend myself, but also anything that she does that causes her harm or creates an appearance that violence happened is going to come down on my head. Like, I wouldn't get involved with women.
Mm-mm.
I wouldn't want anything to do with women. So I always kind of figured MGTOW were just being reasonable. It was it's a reasonable act of self-defense in an unreasonable environment.
Yeah.
So, but that's not what it's not what unwomen thinks, right? Clearly, they suggest that society is rigged against men, and that it is best to avoid women and even mainstream society altogether. Well, yeah, I would suggest that society is rigged against men at this point, and it has been for a long time. If you don't believe me, go look up a blog. Let me see if I can. It's unknown misandry, all one word, .blogspot.com, and it'll be called Unknown Gender History. It used to be called the Unknown History of Misandry. But if you go down the indexes, there are some interesting things that took place in history, like the Badger game and the was it the Lonely Hearts? Let me see if I can find. I'm looking at it on my other computer. Yeah, the Lonely Hearts racket. The female serial killers is quite an interesting set of news stories. There's a lot on this blog. There's a lot of history, and a lot of it is shown in news articles. So it's not just stuff that he's talking about. He's posted evidence.
And it hasn't just been going on for a century, folks. It's been going on for closer to a millennium. I mean, about a millennium, really. It's I know we all talk about feminism in this thing that we do, but it goes back way further than feminism was ever a word. Romantic chivalry is what we're calling it now, because that is what happened, and it's the general idea that men should bend the knee to women because it's apparently romantic. And it's tempting to assume that feminism merely erupted from communism, but no, communism erupted from romantic chivalry. because the strong must bow down to the weak. Those were the seeds of that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
It's a
until
perversion of
until people at large figure that out, we're just going to keep spiraling into this destruction.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah, romantic chivalry is a perversion of an older credo. Chivalry was about owning a horse at a time when most people didn't own horses or have any mode of transportation. They didn't have carts, they didn't have anything like that, unless, like, that was expensive. Owning a horse was almost, especially if you also had armor, was almost like owning a tank. And so the rules of chivalry were about literally preventing knights who owned horses from becoming hell on earth for everybody else. It wasn't about bowing to the weak. It was about recognizing that your fellow human beings were still human beings, even if you had something they didn't. And don't abuse your power just because you can. And what romantic chivalry did was it turned that on its head and said, well, women get to abuse their sexual power and the power of their vulnerability, essentially. And by the power of your vulnerability, I'm talking about the fact that men prefer to protect women, and especially the women around them, rather than to allow bad things to happen to women. And they have, even before romantic chivalry existed, even before society became gynocentric, they protected women as mothers, and they protected women based on women's function in the world. So it was about protecting the function of women more than it was about protecting the individual women themselves. But women began to exploit that during the era of the beginning of romantic chivalry and gynocentric thought. And that essentially turned chivalry, the expectation of chivalry, into an abuse of power rather than it being a means of preventing abuse of power. And it's one of those things that at the time that it happened, everybody thought that it was some step forward. But in reality, it wasn't. It was a step downward. And until we get back to a more egalitarian outlook on accountability and balance of power, like social power and so on, we're going to end up, continuing the gender war that we're in, continuing the downward spiral that our society is in, and MGTOW will continue to be justified. So, I think the biggest objection women have to MGTOW is that they do not kowtow to the expectation of chivalry. And they shouldn't. There's no excuse for that expectation. But in any case, they go on to start to describe our thoughts as the manosphere. These thoughts have thoughts on our thoughts. This
Are they
sounds
the
like
ones
an
we
episode of
provoke?
lesbian porn. Yes, they are the provoked thoughts, and they are talking about how they are going to fight back. So they have defined red pill ideology. Now, for anybody that's actually a newcomer to the movement, you know the red pill metaphor. Everybody knows, I think, the red pill metaphor from the Matrix. The idea that the world you live in isn't the real world. It's an approximation of the real world. It's what you perceive. And of course, in the movie, it's that you're in a simulation, right? And when you take that pill, you come out of the simulation. When you take that red pill, and that's your acceptance that you're in this simulation and you're wanting out. But
I took both pills, by the way. And I live with my decision.
There you go. In political discussion, in gender issues discussion, the idea of the red pill is when you realize the legal environment, you can't unsee it. Right? You recognize that the law actually is, in several ways, discriminatory against men. And men have several areas of disadvantage in society. And there's more than one of those ways. There's numerous ways in which that is influenced by discriminatory law and discriminatory policy. Right? So once you start to notice, once you start to realize just how much law is gendered, just how many social expectations don't jibe with women's claim of equality, just how many times men are told, you can't discriminate against women, but they can discriminate against you, or they can make the government discriminate against you. And it's not the same because you have male privilege. It's an undescribed, uncategorized, unfalsifiable, immeasurable privilege that you have just as part of the patriarchy. And that privilege means that we get to treat you like shit. You have the privilege of being treated like shit. You have the privilege of dying younger than women, of being the majority of workplace accidents, workplace deaths, and being the only sex that can be forced against your will to go into war, right? The privilege of being falsely accused and having no recourse. The privilege of having your children taken away because of your gender, because of your sex. The privilege of being obligated to support another adult for the rest of your life because of your sex. Right? Like the privilege, the privilege of being disadvantaged from day one in education because of your sex. Very, very dubious, this privilege stuff, right? Now, because you have male privilege, after you get out of school, after the discrimination that you faced in school, you get discriminated against in the workplace using human resources to enforce affirmative action laws for women. Right? That's that's pretty much male privilege in a nutshell. The privilege of being last and being responsible for things that you have no control over. And if you really want a red pill, that would be the accountability gap. But what do the unwomen have to say about this? They say red pill ideology, or to be red pilled, means to wake up to a reality that the world favors women over men. In reference to the movie The Matrix, it suggests that people who disagree have taken the blue pill. So they don't really discuss the reality of it, right? And they're not exactly characterizing it correctly either. The red pill does not say that women are never disadvantaged, or that society necessarily always favors women over men. It looks at the law. It looks at accountability. It looks at who is protected when it comes to a right to some recourse if a violent crime is committed against you by the opposite sex. Looks at who is protected from discrimination in the business world and the education world, and who is subject to obligation under the law and who is not. And what is the cause of this? And UN women won't look too deeply into that because they would have to admit that it's not just a perceived reality. there are many ways in which society does give women preferential treatment. And those ways do profoundly affect the lives of men. Then gendered hate speech. By the way, this is hate speech to say all of that, according to unwomen. AWOLD. All women are like that. Used to stereotype women. So they don't even know. They don't even talk about the history behind that either. Right? That started as a response to not all women are like that. And that started as a response to all men are like that. So you had discussion taking place in other forums before Twitter existed, other forums before Reddit existed. And eventually, you have Reddit's men's rights activist subreddit that really is what grew the movement as big as it is now. And you had a lot of activism starting to take place on Twitter around 2013, 2014, which grew because people were coming there from Reddit. I don't think there's quite as much on Facebook, but there's some. But it's always been like, before there were the types of social media that exist today, you had bulletin boards, you had Usenet, you had all kinds of different like messaging systems, you had chat rooms, you had other locations, different websites, comments in under articles, under publications, and so on. And women would make these, particularly feminists, but women in general would make these generalizations of men being violent or being dangerous, being adulterous, whatever stereotype they wanted to promote. And it would be pointed out, you're talking about a tiny percentage of the male population. Like if you look at the violent crime statistics, you find that less than 1% of the population is responsible for violent crimes in the United States, for example. And that's the overall population, male and female. But it's still less than 1% of the male population. And violent crimes are committed by both sexes. Men are usually more likely to get convicted. But in any case, we're still talking about less than 1% of the population. But feminists will generalize this to all men. And then when men point out that, you're talking about, you're condemning all men based on what less than 1% of the population does, feminists will, do you want a cookie for being one of the nice guys? Like, no. Men just don't want to be condemned as one of the violent men, one of the 1%, less than 1% of men who are violent, when they're not that guy. Right? But then when MRAs started talking about the law allows this to happen, and there are women who take advantage of it, even if they are not saying all women are like that, even if they're not saying this problem is female in nature and women need to be reined in. If they're just saying the law needs changed because this is a way in which it can be abused, and there have been documented examples of women abusing it, the first response feminists had was, well, not all women are like that. You can't paint all women with a broad brush like that. We can paint all women with a broad brush. That's why it's called broad. But in any case, yeah, the response basically is, you know what? All women are like that. And it's not to say that every woman will abuse the law in that manner. It is to say that every woman can. Every woman can get away with that. If I completely changed my personality and became a wholly different person than I was, and I decided for some bizarre reason that I no longer loved the man of my dreams, right? And that I no longer wanted to be with the other half of my soul. that I could do exactly the same thing as the individual who I was talking about when I first became part of the online men's movement. I could be just as bad. I know exactly what I could do. And I would never do anything like that to anybody because it's horrible. But that doesn't change the fact that if something in me snapped and changed, the law wouldn't stop me from doing it. That's wrong. I shouldn't be able to do that. Nobody should be able to do that. Nobody should be able to drag someone through the underbelly of the criminal and family court systems for nothing. That should never happen. It shouldn't be doable. Not by men, not by women. And that's what all women are like that means. Not that all women will do that, but that all women can do that. And there is nothing in the law to stop them. They literally have to get to the point of qualifying as a vexatious litigant before you can do anything about it. They can commit process crimes. They can defame. They can even engage in violence. And if they are protected by their allegations of domestic violence and their use of a domestic violence victims advocacy group, they'll get away with it. They won't get arrested. The vexatious litigant in the 7 Years in Hell case went to the home of one of the witnesses. She engaged in witness intimidation. She went to the home of one of the witnesses in that case and stabbed their dog. Like, engaged in animal abuse and slashed their tires.
God damn.
And they called police, and police literally told this woman who had been, her home had been attacked, her yard had been invaded, her tires had been slashed. We can't do anything about this because it's a domestic incident. And our Artemis House is handling the perpetrator's case, and we can't go against them.
Man.
Did you not? All women have that power. That's wrongful power. Nobody should be able to do that.
No.
So yeah, they can't touch all women are like that, because when they get down to what it really means, it doesn't look good for women. Femoids, or PHOs, female humanoid organism. By the way, female incels, also known as female dating strategists, which is hilarious, have a male equivalent of this that is not on this list. FHOs, female humanoid organism, is an insulting term, even though it has the word human in it. If you call women human, that's an insult. That tells you what they think. Women are more than human. Meant to suggest women are not only less than men, but less than human. Except there's an issue with that. If you say I support men's rights because men are human, men's human rights because men are human, you get ridiculed by feminists. I actually did an experiment with a sign, and they took it and, like I kind of expected, photoshopped all kinds of insulting statements into it. I think I still have access to that on Facebook. They went, full, like, men enslave women, and therefore if you support men's rights, you're a slave and you want to be abused and blah blah blah. And then one of them because I had a curtain behind me that had artwork of two dragons and a yin yang symbol. That one was like, I support men's rights because dragon curtain. Like, these women really couldn't handle themselves. But so I don't like the idea of men being human. They do have an equivalent male humanoid organism. The other thing that they like to do is refer to men by parts of their genitalia. So, in the female dating strategy forums before they went private because they couldn't handle being criticized for the way they talked about men, they referred to men as scrotes. Like, you're not a human being. You're not even a male human being. You're not even a male humanoid organism. You're just the skin on your testicles that covers your testicles. That's it.
Jesus. Well, I called my boss a dickhead, and that's okay because he actually is a dickhead. He's
Yeah.
a piece of shit, but he just got fired yesterday, so I'm doing my
Well, then he's not your
celebration.
boss.
Yes. So
There you go. Well, that's fair. I've called a fair number of my bosses cunts. That would be both sexes, but mostly female.
yes.
I've gotten along with most of my male bosses. I've gotten along with most of my female bosses, but there's a few women that have just been absolute holy terrors, and them, yes, I have called them cunts. So there you go. But I've never thought of calling somebody a scrote. A hemorrhoid, but not a scrote. I guess these women think that the scrotum is gross or something. I don't know. It's just skin. Then we have the last one, hypergamous. Hypergamous is essentially the practice of marrying up, the practice of improving your economic situation by marrying a man who makes more money than you, or improving your social situation by marrying a man who has more social standing than you. Like, maybe he's an executive, he's the popular guy in class. And so they describe it, used to derogatorily refer to women being obsessed with marrying up with men who are physically attractive and financially successful. It's also a fact of life, right? Most women do that. Most women look for a guy who is, better looking than they are. Most women look for a guy who is more economically successful than they are, right? They'll declare themselves equal as long as they can still have a provider.
Yep.
Most women look for a guy who is in a job or a profession or a position within his company that will improve their social standing, right? Oh, I married a doctor. Oh, I married a lawyer. Oh, I married a chief executive of this big company. I'm blah blah blah. And so they are looking for like the top 20% and fighting over the top 20%, and then not understanding why, as a 6, she can't find anybody who's interested in settling down with her.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not rare; it's common.
Very, very. I mean, obviously not all, but most. Most women are like that. And I
Yeah.
mean, I guess in some sense there's a little bit of logic behind it. You want to marry someone, you want to be with someone who can financially be responsible for you when you're well, I don't know for you, but your children. Like, if you're going to have
Right.
children and you can't work, you need someone that's going to be able to take care of the financial situation in the household. So, in some sense it does make sense, but this is not what they're doing. They go for, just like you said, they go for the top 20%,
Yep. And
and this
it's
just
crazy because it's historically there was a reason why women might want to marry up. But in modern times, when you can earn your own damn money, there isn't.
Yep. Absolutely right.
But they do. They will obsess and they'll obsess over, like, I have watched women who are more out of shape than I am, which I think is saying a lot because I'm pretty out of shape. I've watched women who are more out of shape than I am. When they describe their standards, they're expecting a guy to be ripped, right? They're expecting him to be in good health. And you know why? It's not just because it's physically attractive, because dad bods are adorable, right? It's because they want him to be able to work. So they're looking for a guy that's not going to be calling in sick. They're looking for a guy that's not going to be having a heart attack and they're going to have to take care of him, right? That's what they're looking for. They're looking for a guy that can pick them up and carry them over the threshold. So romantic. Sorry, I'm going to throw up, guys. But dad bods are cuddlier, by the way. But in any case, not that muscles are bad. Muscles are good too. Like if a guy is ripped, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not down on bodybuilders, or anything like that. Just there's also nothing wrong with the fact that as you age, you're going to age. That's kind of what happens to the human body, and not everybody's going to be in the same physical condition. But if you're going to expect your guy to look like a bodybuilder, right? You shouldn't look like Lizzo.
Right.
Not that there's any stipulation that nobody should look like Lizzo. Just you don't have the right to judge somebody for not looking like they just stepped off of a stage, oiled up with the bikini on bottom and all that. If you look like Lizzo, and similarly, if you're 5'2", don't tell a guy he has to be 6 feet tall. Bullshit. I was 5'9" at my peak height, and I dated guys that were shorter than me and had a blast. There's no reason why you can't connect with somebody who isn't abnormally high. It is above average, right? Your average height is shorter than that. When I was growing up, average height for a man, I think they said was 5'7" or 5'8", something like that. So if I dated an average height guy, I was taller than him, and if I wore heels, I was a lot taller than him. It never stopped me. Shouldn't stop you. You get to know people because of their personality.
Right.
You get to know people because of their character. Not their abs. But yeah, hypergamous. That behavior, historically, there was that economic relationship between marriage and business, in that if your family were goat farmers and some other family were sheep farmers, and you might want to combine lands and family together and become a big conglomerate farm. One of the sons from one family would marry one of the daughters from the other family, and it was economic, and they would be paired together if they were compatible and had the same values and had similar ideas about how to run the farm, and they would become dedicated to each other. Falling in love was not a thing. You didn't fall in love. You developed love. You grew love. Right? And that's really the way it should be too. You find somebody that you you can dedicate yourself to because you have the same values, you have the same interests, you want the same things in life. You want to raise a family together, or you want to start a business together, or you want to support the same causes together, something along those lines. And you build love out of that. It's not something that happens by accident, right? So historically, when a family was looking for, where are we going to send our daughter to become a bride? Who are we going to pair our daughter with? Hypergamy existed because the family wanted to improve their economic circumstances, right? And the appearance of a woman would matter because the family of a guy looking for a bride for their son wanted a woman who was healthy, who would bear children and raise them well, and whose children would survive. Because back in the day, before things like antibiotics and modern medicine, childhood death was common. And so it was a norm because of the environment in which marriage happened and because of the political nature of marriage. And it has unfortunately survived the death of the environment in which marriage happened, which marriage was between families, not just between the couple that got married. Now it's just between the couple that got married. They don't have the family support like they did before, and the divorce rate has skyrocketed. It's not the lifelong obligation that it used to be, and women walk out like it's nothing. 70% of divorce is initiated, approximately 70%, like 69 or something, is initiated by women. Right. So obviously it's not working. Hypergamy is not working like it did before. Women are not happy with that, and it's not supported by the family like it was before. And the environment in which it's occurring has changed dramatically enough that women don't know what they're looking for when they do that, and whatever they are looking for, they're not getting it. Right? And they're not satisfied with loving someone and dedicating themselves to someone and being loved back and having that dedication back. They got to tit for tat and nag and demand equal everything, even if what they're demanding isn't really equal. But again, you and women won't talk about that because it doesn't serve their interests. They want to pretend it's not real, and men are complaining about it or talking about it just because they hate women. And why would they go through all that? Well, this is the rest of the article. Real world impact. How gender stereotypes harm everyone. In the manosphere, everybody loses. This is their words, not mine, of course. In the manosphere, everybody loses. Misogyny and gender inequality are harmful to men as well as women. Yeah, patriarchy hurts men too, guys.
You knew it was coming.
Yeah, it's bullshit, but there is no. By the way, the patriarchy of feminist imagining isn't real. Right? There was a balance of gender obligations, gender-based obligations, gender-based restrictions, and gender-based rights. Both sexes had them, all three, under coverture. And that's still true under guardianship as well. What feminists did was they came along and said, all the obligations and restrictions that women face, we don't want those. All of the rights that women have, we want to preserve those, but we also want all of the rights that men have. But we don't want any of their restrictions or obligations either. And that's what they fought for in changes to law and policy. And that's what they got. So yeah, misogyny and gender inequality are harmful to men. Well, gender inequality is harmful to men. Misogyny is overblown too, right? And this is an interesting side note. Right? If you look up the meaning of misogyny, it has extra, right? If you look up the meaning of misandry, it's hatred of men. But if you look up the meaning of misogyny, it has a whole big entry in most dictionaries where it's not just hatred of women, hatred, fear, distrust, prejudice against, and then it'll give examples, and it'll be things like thinking a woman can't do everything that a man can do the same that a man can do it. If you're a woman and you think that's misogynistic, I challenge you to write your name in the snow with P. Oh, and also to bend steel with your bare hands, because I've seen my husband do that.
Jeez.
He there was a festival we were at where they have, you know how they sometimes take an old junker, and you're allowed to hit it with a sledgehammer for a minute for $1.
Mm-hmm.
He was having a bad day, so he paid $5. And the guy took one look at him and he was like, you know what? You can have all the time you want. So he was beating the hell out of this car with a sledgehammer. And he was trying to cave in this one part of the roof, and it kept hitting the door frame. And it was really annoying him. So, somebody else had already busted out all the windows. The door was permanently broken open. So he grabbed the top of the door frame and he just bent it down like a coat hanger.
God damn.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, I can't do that. I'm not equal. Very much not equal. Not that I don't think all men can do that. He's uniquely strong. I've seen other things like that with him. But my brother is significantly stronger than me. And I couldn't pick somebody my size up, but he could, for instance. Even at our age, we're in our 50s. Maybe he would hurt his back, but he'd still physically be able to do it. I couldn't. If I tried to, my muscles would not perform the task, right? And that's the difference. That's the difference between male and female right there, in terms of physical strength. He could outrun me, not just because of my asthma. He could always outrun me, even when I was in tip-top shape. Even when I was in good shape and he wasn't. So, but yeah, the idea of noticing gender differences is referred to as misogyny by feminists.
Crazy.
Everything I just said, they would call misogynistic. Also, I have been called a misogynist for stating that if something is illegal and a person breaks that law and commits that crime, whether or not that person is convicted of that crime and faces punishment, and how much punishment that person faces, should not be determined by their sex. I've been called a misogynist for saying that.
That's
Been called a
insane.
misogynist for saying that fathers are as important to their children as mothers are. If you don't hate men, according to feminists, you hate women.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't think if you don't think men's interests and men's civil rights should be subjugated to women's interests, you hate women. If you're, according to feminists. But yeah, misogyny is harmful to men. In a collection of global data, Equimundo found that men with restrictive gender attitudes are more likely to engage in harmful behaviors like risk-taking and substance abuse. They are also more prone to depression and suicidal thoughts. This is an interesting one, right? So, men with restrictive gender attitudes. They didn't really describe what those restrictive gender attitudes are, right? Are they restrictive gender attitudes about what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman or both? Right? Are they engaging in substance abuse to escape the knowledge that if their wife pours boiling water on them when they sleep, she's unlikely to face any consequences? But if they call police, they might get arrested?
Mhm.
Because that's a fact. It's not an attitude. Are they depressed because they know that if their wife leaves them, even if she is at fault for the divorce, even if she cheats, she is likely to have custody of the children, and they are likely to live the rest of their lives in poverty? Are they depressed because they know that if they want to get a date, they have to be 6 feet tall, but they're only 5'7"? Are they suicidal because not just the first, not just the 10th, not just the 20th, but the 100th woman they approached told them to go to hell? These women don't consider that. These women don't consider what a man's experience might be. They just tack it up to misogyny. Gender stereotypes about men in the manosphere act as a cycle. If boys and men aren't encouraged to speak openly about their emotions and issues, they may gravitate toward these online communities as a place to get advice on topics like relationship struggles, fatherhood, anxiety, and sexual health. Let's break that down for a minute. All right? If boys and men aren't encouraged to speak openly about their emotions or issues, now who's not encouraging them to do that?
These people are delusional.
Let's go back up here. Men's rights activists, MRAs, often take an academic tone to claim that feminism and men's rights to vote, to educate, to leadership positions have disadvantaged men. MRA preachers suggest society is gynocentric, that is, dominated by feminine interests. Right? Men who talk about fathers being kicked out of their families, men who talk about due process rights in criminal court when a man is accused of a crime he didn't commit, men who talk about the difficulties men have in the job market because of affirmative action for women, men who talk about boys being left behind in education, and who recognize that it is a bad thing for inequality in the education system to flip instead of being corrected to 50-50, get condemned for talking about these things, right? Men wouldn't go to these communities where they're allowed to talk if we let them talk, but they can't talk about these things because that's misogynistic. Like, are you sure, ladies? Are you sure you want men to talk openly about their emotions and issues? What are you going to do when they start talking about things you don't want to hear? What are you going to do when they say, you know what? We don't want to be your ATMs anymore? What are you going to do when they say, it's also rape when you do it?
They'll make it illegal. You are not allowed to acknowledge these things, that they happen, that they exist. No. Nope.
You got a license for that rape accusation.
Men have petitioned in the UK over and over and over again for the law to be changed so that the label rapist can be applied to any person who forces another person into reproductive sex, potentially reproductive sex. Just coitus, right? Doesn't matter male or female, whether you're forced to penetrate or forcibly penetrated, call it that. Call it rape. Right? But UK law says that rape can only be perpetrated with a penis. If the perpetrator does not have a penis, it's other sexual assault. And while the sentence in prison can be the same length, the stigma for the perpetrator is not the same. Right? Somebody convicted of sexual assault might have done anything from groping to full on rape, but you won't know if it's a woman because they're all categorized under the term sexual assault. Why on earth would women want to minimize criminal behavior like that?
And then they turn around and tell you that 99% of rapes are by men. Well, what the fuck is happening with the other 1%, given that you're using statistics that rely on the idea that only men can rape, and that it is physically impossible for women to be charged with the crime of rape? Surely it's 100%. Like, if that's how you're going to set everything up, then surely 100% of men are rapists.
No,
and surely some of you should be looking at the idea that the statistic only looks like that because you literally defined rape as something that can only be committed by biological men. So where are you even getting the 1% of women who have managed to legally rape someone? Sorry, we're never going to get monetized. It doesn't matter. Suicide, Hitler. But I think I've made my point already.
Yeah. I mean,
like if you just 1984 things out of the language, then obviously you're going to get a legal blind spot. Like if you just decide that things are what we say they are, then we're just going to happen. And the same thing has happened with wave 5 of feminism. Yeah, things are what they say we are. Like a man is a woman if we say it is. A woman is a man if we say it is. Yeah, reality is what we say it is. We've reached that point. The phenomenon we call leftism has reached the point where they can literally just say reality is what we say it is. And that's it.
Yep.
No further examination necessary. Reality is what we say it is. And we'll fucking throw you in jail if you don't like it. I have to go home in like 3 weeks. I'm not looking forward to it.
Yeah, I don't think any of us are. Like, so we need to just like detain you here.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I can't go back to the UK. He's being detained here for an indefinite amount of time. Under
my
house arrest with Lauren.
My name is Todd. I have H1B. Please give me a job.
Oh my gosh. I don't think there's all that many people here who could claim that they do everything that Dr. Randomer Cam does. There we go. We definitely need there's an opening here. But yeah, it's bizarre. Feminists will say, "Oh, men need to open up more. Men need to cry more. Men need to talk more." And then as soon as men talk about the problems that are actually affecting them, right? I'm suicidal because I've lost my children. I haven't had contact with my children for 6 months, and it doesn't look like I'm ever going to see them again. Oh, stop crying, you whiny man, baby. What did you do to their mother to piss her off? Not, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Parental alienation is wrong. Oh, you're making that up. Parental alienation doesn't exist. Right? Never mind the fact that he's written them dozens of letters and she's thrown them away and told him daddy doesn't want to see them. And that he's a bad abandoner and they should hate him. Right? Nope, that doesn't happen. It's not real. I only know half a dozen guys personally that has happened to. But I've met dozens more online that have experienced the same thing, but it's not real. Right? That's it's easier to say it's not real than it is to hold women accountable for it. Or they'll point to the small percentage of parents that are men who do it. Oh, is it real when they do it? I see. Okay. That goes on. Gender stereotypes about men in the manosphere act as a cycle. If boys and men aren't encouraged to speak openly, they gravitate toward these online communities where they're encouraged to speak openly, by the way. See how that works? Movember's survey. So this is important to understand, okay? November's coming up. Historically, we have supported the Movember movement. I don't know about the rest of Honey Badger Radio, but HBR Talk is not supporting the Movember movement this year. I will discuss when November comes up ways to donate directly to organizations that support research for cancer, particularly men's cancers. But I am not promoting donating to the Movember Foundation. It was shaky last year. We had our doubts last year. This year it's been pretty solid. Like if they're doing this, and to the degree that UN Women are endorsing them, that's enough for me. They're feminist now, and I don't want anything to do with them. And it's not just, ooh, they got touched by the yucky women's, right? They are promoting the idea of toxic masculinity. And toxic masculinity is essentially a buzzword or buzz phrase that feminists use to stereotype men by applying characteristics that are simply immature as masculinity and generalizing them to all men. And that is essentially the feminist toxic masculinity narrative. These behaviors are genderless. Both sexes engage in them. And both sexes grow out of them when they reach real mature adulthood. And there are people among both sexes who fail to do that. Feminists only condemn that when it's the individual is a man. So when you see an organization using the term toxic masculinity today, the mythopoetic men's movement, when they used that term, they were actually talking about ways that men could support boys into developing masculine maturity, which is a level of accountability that women probably don't understand. And toxic masculinity was failure to develop that level of maturity, but it was social pressures that prevent boys from developing that maturity. And the idea was men supporting growth and maturity in boys. But when feminists talk about it, it's just condemning men. And it's just condemning boys. Right? So Here they say, Movember's survey found that young men who actively engage with masculinity influencers reported higher levels of worthlessness and nervousness, were more likely to take performance-enhancing supplements and work out despite an injury, were less likely to prioritize their mental health, and placed more value on wealth and popularity among their male friends. So these are all things that are supposed to be bad, right? Reported higher levels of worthlessness and nervousness. When you recognize the way that the world treats men, it can create a sense of worthlessness. When you recognize that other people don't value you as much as they value the opposite sex, it's depressing. Like, if you're somebody who cares about the men in your family and you realize that about them, that other people don't value them as much as they value you, that is quite depressing. When you're a parent of a son and you realize the rough road of hoe he's going to have because of that, that's very depressing and angering. And of course it makes you nervous. When you're doing life without a safety net, you're going to be a lot more nervous if you know somebody's waiting to catch you when you fall. You know, if you know somebody's waiting to catch you when you fall, you have less reason to fear risk. If you know that nobody's going to catch you when you fall, you know that every risk you take is real, and every risk you take might be the last one. But you know, how dare men figure that out? How dare they? That's misogynistic. Toxic masculinity and awareness of your environment. How dare? How very dare? Men being more likely to take performance-enhancing supplements and work out despite an injury. Right. So I was an athlete. And when I was in high school, when you had an injury, you didn't stop working out. You changed your workout to one that was therapeutic for the injury. Performance-enhancing supplements can be anything from vitamins and minerals intended to support your performance. Maybe supplements intended to support your body's ability to process and assimilate proteins and such, to caffeine, to steroids. This doesn't really give much description of which things they're talking about. They just condemn it whole hog, right? Again, how dare men try to improve their health? And how dare men be stoic and tough? Why might men do that? You think it might have something to do with that hypergamy? Men were less likely to prioritize their mental health. What happens when you go to a shrink? And they're, you tell them you're experiencing profound depression because your wife divorced you and the court gave her custody, and now she's not even letting you have visitation with your kids. But the child support system is taking 60% of your paycheck before deductions, and you're living on what's left after that and taxes are taken out. And the psychiatrist says, well, that's your toxic masculinity talking. Have you considered that maybe you just resent your wife? What? Why would you expect to get help there? There are places, you can go. There are people like Tom Golden, Dr. Tara Pamatier, who recognize men's issues. There's the Center for Male Psychology, and all of the men who work there work with them. There are men's organizations that can help you find treatment that isn't going to blame you for experiencing things that other people did to you, and discovering that these things have an effect on your mental health. But the recommended organizations, the most widely recommended organizations from outside the movement, aren't necessarily going to do that. And what this is, we're less likely to prioritize their mental health, is the criticism that you don't subjugate yourself to the toxic masculinity narrative that is dominating the mental health system. It's now a feminist system. So perhaps the reason that people listening to male influencers don't, quote, prioritize their mental health is because they're not doing it like women. Maybe they're not going to talk therapy. Maybe they're going to men's sheds. Maybe they're talking to their friends. Maybe they're seeking ways to process things themselves. And maybe they're not talking to feminist-approved psychiatrists because those psychiatrists and those psychologists, those therapists are not helping them. And then this last one just blows my mind. Men who actively engage with masculinity influencers are more likely to, or place more value on wealth and popularity among their male friends. Then what? I'm a little lost here. Place more value on wealth. How is that a bad thing? Is there a point to that? Is it? I don't understand what the issue is there. Is it a problem for men to place some value on wealth and popularity among their friends?
It's only a problem when they don't give that money to women. That's when the problem happens.
Yeah, this last one is like, and they have butts. All men have butts. This is really dangerous, guys. Butts belong to women. Only women are allowed to sit down. What is this thing with men having butts? Like, what the fuck? Place value on wealth and popularity. Most people place value on wealth and popularity.
Yeah.
And again, hypergamy. Women place value on what? Wealth and popularity. Could it possibly be that maybe that might be influencing men's placement of value a little
Right.
bit?
Absolutely right.
And you know those gals that like they start dating a guy, right? That maybe they like his income level and they like his popularity level, and they've decided that he's tall enough and his abs are tight enough and blah blah blah. But they don't like that one friend. Like, I know that we said we're going to get married and everything, but dude, you have got to stop hanging out with Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Kevin's a dipshit. I don't want Kevin in the house. Don't bring him over here anymore. Like, if I did that to my husband, he would be like, that's not going to happen, honey.
Yeah.
Kevin is my friend. You can have a girls' night when Kevin comes over if you don't want to be around him. That's fine, right? But that there would be no me telling him who he can and can't hang out with.
Mm-mm.
Right? But women do that. And then once they get rid of Kevin, Joe is a bad guy. You got to get rid of Joe. I saw Joe looking at my butt the other day. Because he doesn't have one of his own. Shit. We got a super chat. Albatross gave us $2 and said, "Dude, I hate social engineering." The thing is, that's all women do.
Mm-hmm.
Social engineering.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm glad you quit hanging out with Kevin and Joe. But Bob, holy fuck, what's the matter with that dude? Could you, like, maybe just hang over at his house instead of him coming over here? You know, or, why do you always smell like smoke when you come home from Fred's house? And don't go visit George. His wife is better looking than me. I know you're just going over there to look at her. Yeah. Women place a lot of value on men's wealth and popularity, and then they get rid of all their friends. And of course, you know, you can continue to spend all the time you want with Larry because Larry is the CEO of Hoity Toity Company X, and you know, we should spend lots of time with Larry and his wife just because, you know, we might be invited to go to their condo in Florida sometime. Like, yeah, totally. But it's just men who place more value on wealth and popularity among their friends. Goes on to say, stereotypes about women in the manosphere promote myths and hierarchies that hold women back. We're pretty powerful, guys. Apparently, we're keeping women from doing things.
Like you could ever stop a woman from doing whatever the hell she wanted.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. I guess there are no female CEOs anywhere because we stopped that from happening, right? Oh wait, no, there's been female CEOs. I think wasn't there a female CEO at YouTube?
Yeah. Susan Wojcicki. May she rest in pepperoni.
You know, feminists have one that when they don't like somebody. They were saying it about Hulk Hogan. I don't get where they come up with this breast in piss. What the fuck? That's nasty.
Nasty
Pepperoni
people.
at least is edible. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, stereotypes about women in the manosphere promote myths and hierarchies that hold women back. An international survey in support of he for she, a UN Women Solidarity Initiative for Gender Equality.
Oh my god.
He for she was about men sacrificing their interests to promote those of women. Found that Gen Z audiences are the most exposed to sexist rhetoric online, which doesn't actually indicate anything because Gen Z women, you know, they have the least issues, you know, out of all the women in the history of Western culture. Like, Gen Z women have the most legal protections of all time that women have had. The only thing that they're maybe starting to lose is the ability to genocide the human race through baby killing before birth. But
also, quite a lot of them are getting raped across Europe. It's becoming a little bit of a problem. People are sort of, and little boys and men are getting raped as well as attacked and what have you. But European women have finally met their match with the client groups of what has developed from feminism. I mean, everyone knows men oppress women everywhere and always have, and so we need to extract everything that men do and give it to women. And ever since they figured that out, they went, well, surely white men are the worst of the men, because they're the men we can see. We don't know about men in faraway lands, and we don't care because they're not our property. The men of our country are our property, and so they put laws in place that punish men for any reason, their own men for any reason, and that includes flooding the country with foreign rapists who prefer women, especially white women, who are slags. I'm not gonna pretend that these things are true at the same time, folks. Foreign men are rapists, and Western women are slags. Yes, I know they're not. Yeah, I have to hashtag not all of this in both cases, but yes, it's true. The foreign men who have been promised a life for free are quite disproportionately rapists, and women who have been how do I say this as delicately as I can? Women who have been trained to be hypergamistic, who have been taught that their actions should never have any consequences. Yeah, they're going to be a bit slutty, and that doesn't make it okay to rape them. And it's a good thing that Western men aren't raping them, no matter how slutty they get. But foreign men who haven't been through this ringer, they kind of see those massive sluts and they think, why would they be such massive sluts if they didn't want to get nailed right here and now? And so that's happening. The patriarchy of feminist imaginings is being created by feminists, because they hate their own men so much that they're trying to replace them with foreign men who actually do fit the model of toxic masculinity. And it's not because of their masculinity, it's because they've been left behind like so many Western men have. And that's some grade 8 shit, for anyone who's wondering. I know the majority of the right is going to be like, no, these men from other places are just they're just monsters. They're just demons. They've just never been controlled. Oh no, my friend, they have been controlled, and that's the problem. They've been controlled to control everyone else, and that's, again, I don't have time to get into it. But feminists have created a situation where they can barely leave the house without worrying about rape, despite having told us this whole time that they need to be constantly worried about rape because of their own men. But now that they've replaced their own men with 50 IQ desert monkeys, now they actually have to be scared about rape constantly, because it's actually a possibility. And I don't know how to conclude this other than, don't put women politically in charge of anything, because they don't know what they want. They're kind of, I mean, to some extent, men don't know what they want either, but they're better at getting together and figuring it out. Women, when you get them together, they only get more chaotic. Like, an individual woman is an intelligent person, potentially, but women together as a collective is a nightmare. Random number generator that can't figure out what it wants, because it needs to be led, and it needs to be led by men. I don't know. I don't know. Well, I guess my audience is going to be okay with me saying that, but no. It's Yeah, no.
Well, you have to realize a big part of the
someone needs to
problem is
lead the pack, and we've given women a century at it, a millennium at it, and they haven't done very well. So
they can't even make their own mind, right? You have one group of women that is promoting the idea of a sexual revolution, where women can do whatever sexual thing they want, dress however they want, act however they want, fuck whoever they want, and so on, consequence free, despite the existence of things like STIs and criminals. And you have sort of the other half of women promoting the idea that women who wear scanty clothing are dressing for the male gaze, and they're facilitating rape by giving men what they want, and blah blah blah. The basically the idea that a woman who dresses a certain way is quote unquote asking for it, comes from women promoting the idea that how a woman dresses serves men, and that is therefore bad. Not that it shows a lack of respect for herself, and that is therefore an issue. Not that it isn't functional, not that it isn't, good for being able to work and so on, but because men might see body parts and enjoy that, and that women are bitter about that, right? And then you have the other half of women going, don't wear anything, just throw a band-aid over your boobs and your cunt, and you're fine, and nobody should notice because it's totally normal. And when you have a clash of cultures where the women's sensibilities have dictated that other women have to be covered from head to toe, and they've blamed it on men and male sexuality, and they've told men over and over again, raised them from childhood to believe that women have to dress like that because they can't control themselves. And you put them in a culture where half of the women are saying, go outside with just a band-aid over your private areas, and nobody's allowed to notice, you are going to have some conflict. And crimes will be committed. And if you also, in that society, are not allowed to notice crime when certain people do it, and only allowed to notice it when other people do it, then you have a pattern of crime that people are getting away with. And it eventually will come to a head. There will be problems from this. And everybody involved is going to suffer. Right? And a lot of it traces back to female sensibilities and female competition for attention from males, and for resources from males. Basically, female competition for control over the male libido. But you can't say that. That's misogyny. So, yeah. Meanwhile, it says younger men today are more likely to hold regressive ideas about gender roles than older men, representing a backlash that could reverse hard-won gains in gender equality. Oh no. Women might not be able to have it all anymore. Actually, it hasn't been that great having it all for a lot of women, right? Because when you have it all and you have to do it all in order to maintain it all, then you develop all the same health problems that men have, and you develop them sooner and worse because you're trying to do your job and his. It's not healthy. Be like if men decided they were going to come home from 8 to 12-hour work shifts, and then also do all of the housework and raise the kids, and try to change the way that they regulate their emotions to mirror the way that women regulate theirs, or fail to regulate theirs. And it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of energy to be emotionally dysregulated. They would get sick too. You would see male suicide double or triple or worse. What the data says about manosphere and online misogyny. We're going to have to figure that out next week. We'll look into that next week. But it looks like they're going to continue with the same storyline, condemning us for talking about these issues in very vague terms without any evidence to back them up. So next week, we will start at what the data says about the manosphere and online misogyny. And then at the end of it, it says what comes next, and it links to how to counter the manosphere's toxic influence. So if we finish that next week, then we will get into this article. I just love their image here. How do you counter the manosphere's toxic influence? The unsubscribe button. Like these people were ever subscribed to us. So with that, I don't think we have any. Well, we have this super chow. I think might have been read. It was from yesterday at 11:22 p.m. But I'm gonna read it anyway because it doesn't say done afterwards, so it might not be. And this is interesting anyway. But it's Richard Bier gave us $5 yesterday and said, Brian, it's the notion that you were mugged 10 years ago, but didn't realize it at the time, and only after 10 years of reflection and analysis do you now realize that you have been mugged, and therefore justice demands that action be taken against the perpetrators. So obviously that's about accusing somebody, the many women who have accused somebody 20 years later that they say raped them 20 years ago, at which that happens all too frequently. And one of the biggest problems with it is, when a violent crime happens, the perpetrator often leaves DNA behind on the victim. Even if there's not a rape, if it's a mugging, you are engaging in violence against another individual. Unless you're holding someone up at gunpoint and not touching them, there's the possibility that they've got your skin under their fingernails. There's the possibility that you left hair on them, and those can be sources of DNA as well. And so the individual needs to go to the police right away, the hospital, and get taken care of. Get a kit done if it's a rape kit, but basically get that evidence collected so that it'll be easier to prove who the perpetrator was. And if you don't do that, you undermine the case against the perpetrator, right? But if we set things up so that 20 years down the line, when that evidence is not available, the perpetrator now has to defend himself, or an accused man has to defend himself. And let's say I was really dumb and I decided to go into that part of the Dayton metro area that you don't go into if you're white. And I went down a dark alley, and it's cold weather out. Like the attackers that mug me have ski masks or whatever to keep themselves warm, so I can't see their faces. And I don't say anything for 10 years, and then I come back later, and I think by reputation I know who did it, but I wouldn't have been able to describe them. And my clothes have been washed dozens and hundreds of times since then, or maybe they're worn out and thrown in the trash at that point. I don't have any physical evidence, and they're having to defend against this. What if I accuse the wrong guys? And what if, during the mugging, when they wrestled my wallet out of my pocket, one of them left behind hair, if I went to the cops right away and then I accused the wrong guys, that hair would also prove, oh, it wasn't that guy, it was somebody else. Right? But now, 10 years later, that we don't have that hair, that guy cannot insist on a DNA test to prove that it wasn't him. And maybe 10 years ago on the night that it happened, he was across town doing something that he got a receipt for and that he was on camera for. But, you know, since there was no accusation made that night, that business dumped that camera footage 30 days later because there was no legal request for it. And he didn't keep that receipt. 10 years later, he can't prove where he was. He might not even remember what he was doing that night. And that's why it is a due process violation to wait 10 years to accuse somebody. Because if you get the wrong person, or the crime didn't happen, that individual has a lot less opportunity to use documentation that might have been available at the time of his whereabouts and his activities to go into court and say, look, I could not have been in that section of town doing that thing at that time because I was in this other area at that time doing this other thing. And here's the proof. Right? You can't say that if you don't have the proof. You can't say that if it's been 10 years and the video's gone and the receipt's gone and you don't remember what day you went where. So that's another thing. Like, back to that NAFALT. All women have that power. And it's all women can do that and be taken seriously. Can make that allegation 10 years later and be taken seriously. And all women have, I guess, benefited. I don't like the word benefit because I don't think it's a good thing that this has happened. But all women have the power to exploit changes in law and policy that allow longer and longer times to pass between the crime and the allegation. So, yeah, all women are like that. AWOL. Even if they wouldn't take advantage of it, all women can. With that, thanks everybody for listening. Meredith, I'm sorry your super chow has not come through. So I'm assuming it's gonna hit like during the after show, which like I don't have any control over that. But in any case, I know it probably says honey for the badgers and which HBR talk it is, and I will thank you for the super chow and the honey for the badgers. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks to my two co-hosts for going through this nasty ass material with me. And thanks to Brian very much for facilitating this and everybody else that works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. And good night, all.
Good night, y'all.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.